Short stories, they're short and sweet and don't usually take more than a few hours to finish reading. I personally don't actually read that much short manga or short series nowadays especially. So this time for contracts, I actually took the effort and actually picked up some short manga. And I guess there's just some stuff I want to talk about with regards to short series. In fact, maybe I should actually get Sheeran to recommend me some because he loves one-shots and short manga series, but that's for a separate matter. Anyway, the two short manga that I read this time is Mata Onaji Yume o Miteita and Takopi's Original Sin. Both of these series actually have quite a lot of things in common about them, but actually in a very different tone. So it makes it very interesting to talk about both of these together, and which is what I'm going to do this time. To start us off with Mata Onaji Yume o Miteita, which is I Saw the Same Dream Again, is a series which follows Nanoka, who's a grade schooler who's tasked with a presentation in her school about what happiness means to her. And this takes her on an adventure/journey, interacting with different people to try and figure out her answer to this question. The series itself is quite light-hearted and bright, and mostly focuses on the idea of self-discovery and happiness, though using a method that I'm not actually a fan of, and I'll talk about it a bit more. While the series seems very normal on the surface, especially at first read, there are actually a few points in the story where you can start sensing that there are a few things that are a bit off about the world, and that is as intended, as the whole idea is to slowly unravel the fact that the world is not actually a real life kind of world, but it's actually a dream world, which is why the series is actually named this way, because of the whole fact that this is all supposed to actually just be a dream. While I actually quite like the themes that the manga is trying to talk about and have embedded throughout the entire story, as well as the unraveling of the world itself and the way it's written, I've never really been a very big fan of the idea of making the whole series take place in a dream. It sort of leaves something to always be desired whenever you read a series like this, and in the end it just doesn't feel as fulfilling as more traditional series that the actions you believe are taking place in real life. Because if a series is taking place in a dream, technically none of the things actually happen, but in a sense for this series, it makes a lot of sense why it is a dream, because it's not really talking about a specific incident or specific goal, it's more about talking about the idea of finding happiness, so it doesn't really feel as bad, but that doesn't take away from the fact that I'm just personally not a big fan of it. And yet, I still think that the entire story and the general idea of the series is interesting and is well written. It's just that no matter what, I've never just liked the idea of dreams being used this way, which is why I don't really enjoy the series as much. But I would say for this series, it's done in a relatively tasteful and not really a bad way, so to speak, because there are certain series which don't really make use of the whole idea of this whole incident is a dream very well. So I'll say that as much as I have a personal dislike for this sort of things, it's not a bad series at all, and I would still say that it's worth reading. The next series I'm going to talk about is Takopi's Original Sin, and it's a series that follows an alien whose job is to try and make everyone as happy as possible, and the name of this alien is Takopi, which kind of makes sense. However, instead of just trying to make people happy, he suddenly finds himself in a situation which is a lot darker and deeper than he actually understands. So in order not to spoil the series and the whole story too much, I won't go into too much detail about the things that take place, but to put it simply, the series is quite dark and quite complex in the things that are taking place, and it makes use of some, I guess, methods which might not make everyone very comfortable, as it talks makes use of a few sensitive issues and topics to kind of show the kind of message that it's trying to do and invoke certain emotions in it. However, these methods that are used in the series are actually quite vital. That's one of the most vital parts about this series, in my opinion, is the huge contrast between the darkness of, I guess you could say, humanity that is shown in the series, as well as Takopi's very naive mindset coming in as an alien, not really understanding anything about the human world. And it's one of the most vital points, which is why, despite it not being very suitable for everyone, I would say that for the sake of what the author had intended on doing with the series, is quite fitting. So one of the more important things about this series is that the chronology of the whole story is not in order. It actually gets not extremely complicated, but you have to kind of piece together things a bit more. You kind of get given it, but you could say it gets a bit more complicated, but in a sense is sort of like an unraveling of the proper timeline of what everything happened. And this part is very important because one of the most important twists of the series comes because of this past incident that takes place. So I wouldn't say that this is really something specific to talk about, but for a matter of fact that this series does actually make use of past events quite well, and it really adds a complexity to the series that makes it a bit more interesting compared to other series. In general though, if I had to compare this to a series that more people might know, I would say that it has similar vibes to something like Oyasumi Punpun, though without as much development in characters just due to the nature and length of the series in question. In terms of similarities, you could say that both series make use of a lot of darker issues about humanity and stuff to bring forth a brighter message. I would say not so much the case for Oyasumi Punpun. It's a bit more subtle in it, but in a sense it's still trying to bring forth a happier ending while making use of very dark general themes in the series. So while it might not be very enjoyable or quite hard to swallow for quite a few people because of the nature of such works, I would say that it is a series that is able to strike certain emotions which cannot be struck otherwise with a more generic, brighter style of writing. So funny enough, while both of these short manga series have completely different vibes, you could say that they technically do actually talk about the same aim, or in the end try and convey the same kind of message and themes at the end of the series, and that is for people to search for happiness in their own ways, no matter what kind of situation they are in. So in a sense, you could say that happiness comes in many forms, and both of these series actually help to prove that point, because while being so starkly different in the mood and the vibes of the series, in the end, the final message for both of these series sort of end up being towards the same central theme of happiness by the end of it. In the end, the nature of short series makes it so that the series will centralize more around themes and ideas while working towards a final goal, instead of working towards developing characters like more conventional series and longer series, I would say. While I am more used to reading longer series that focus more on characters because I kind of enjoy like seeing character growth, I'd say these series all have their own very good benefits to it and are actually very interesting in themselves, as they are just quite different from longer series and the way that execution of the series has to be done. In a sense, these shorter reads do actually end up being a lot more thought-provoking by being more striking and quick in their delivery due to their shorter length, which makes it a lot more different from the kind of experience that you can get from a longer series. In a sense, these series are able to provide a very strong message very quickly and just linger in your mind for a bit just because of the way that they are written. Because of this, I'll say that reading these short manga series was actually quite an interesting experience, because I never really enjoyed too much of these idea and thematic centralized series as much, but I've grown a deeper appreciation of them after reading these two. In a later review, I'll be talking about a few anime movies as well, and I feel like short series have a lot of similarities to them just because of the length of the series and just the way that they centralize around ideas and themes more than characters itself, and that will come out at a later date. If you want to check out a more in-depth review about these two series with spoilers, I will have a review document in the description where I have written down all my thoughts on it on paper, which I'm just more comfortable with writing. So if you want to see a more in-depth review without caring about spoilers too much, which I'll recommend you read the series before checking it out, then you can do so, and you can check it out in the description. So with that, I have nothing else to say. I would say these two series are pretty interesting to read, and if you have some free time, I would definitely recommend that you should go and take a look at them. But until next time, I don't really have much else to say. Goodbye, until next review. Woo!